All right, I want to go over some talking points on these Magnum heads. So these are going to go on my Jeep. They were presented to me as stock rebuilds. I think if they were run at all, they had very low mileage. And what I mean by that is the exhaust valves obviously look like they had a small amount of run time, but the intakes don't. So they may have been run for a short time. One thing to note is how much material you have on this intake valve and how much of an improvement you can make by putting a back cut on that. This is where I mark out. I'm going to mark my head gasket so that I can unshroud the intake. I'm not going to take a lot of material out of it. So here's something I want to talk about. I made a lot of comments on the Speedmaster video about the exhaust ports and how I thought they were way too big. I'm going to make another video addressing that, and I'm going to hold up a few different heads and a couple of different headers and go over some things. But on this head, on this stock Magnum head, so I held this gasket up to my Speedmaster head, and it actually fit the ports very well. So this is a representation of the Speedmaster port. Now I bolted that up to my head and I marked out the gasket so I can see where I need to be to gasket match these. Now I'm not going to take it out to this size, but I want to tell you that this matches the Speedmaster head very well. So here's a couple of things. Let's say that I fully gasket match to this. Well, look right here at the material that you have for a sealing surface. Okay, that's going to blow out on you. So it's not just opening it up to gasket size, but you're not leaving yourself any room. Now obviously that's going to be a different case in the Speedmaster head, but on these heads, fully opening that up isn't going to leave you a good sealing surface, and you're going to blow out your gasket. There's some other things. So for me, I'm going to port to the roof and I'm going to open up the walls. I'm not going to port very much at all down here. With this hump in the head and the majority of your flow being up here, I'm not going to gain anything down here. So there's no point in me taking that all the way out to the gasket size and not having a gain on this head. The other thing I want to talk about is, so I got a few sets of headers. This gasket is marked out for my 408 stroker and my Durango. I held the header up to this gasket and I marked out where the header flange would come across there. Okay, and then here's where the header flange starts to slouch in, like typical Mopar small blocks. So the reason I marked that out is when I ported my Edelbrock heads and I held this up to the head, I made that same mark and I didn't bother porting below that line because that's already where my port window on my pipe ends. So anything I port below this is just going to run into that lower flange, and you can see probably a good quarter inch of flange. So on my Edelbrock heads I didn't bother porting this all the way open for that reason. So that's another thing to talk about. That's why I don't think you need to open this up all the way. Once you put on your manifold, so once you put on your manifold or header of choice, you may have a significant flange down here, in which case just opening it up to this size is not going to help you any. It's going to hurt you because you're going to come out that port, you're going to hit the flange, and it's going to cause turbulence in your port here that you don't need to have. So on this head, I'm going to focus on widening it up, maybe square it off some, but I'm not going to port the lower parts of my port. I'm not going to open up to that part of the gasket. And again, I'll do a follow-up video with some different headers and show you some of the differences. The other thing on these heads, if you do nothing else to your iron Magnum heads, if you don't gasket match the intake, if you don't touch the exhaust, if you don't do anything else to your iron heads, work the throat in the bowl, or have somebody at your machine shop or whatever work the throat in the bowl. Take a good look at these. That is 82%, 83% of the intake valve diameter. That's how far off these things are for absolutely no reason. You can see your seat, and then you can see how much they taper in. If you do nothing else to your iron heads, have somebody take those out. At least take them out 88, 89%. That's going to be your biggest improvement to your Magnum heads. The intakes, despite how they look, actually flow very well, and the exhaust actually flow very well. It doesn't take much to see 240 to 260 CFM out of a Magnum head. You don't have to unshroud the valve, you don't have to do anything, but at the very least, work your throat in your bowl. Get that out 88, 89% of your intake valve diameter, and I think you're going to see a significant improvement on your Magnum heads.